So what we're studying today are some terms that are used to allow basic navigation of the brain. I've embedded this image from the internet here. You ought to spend some time studying this, really thinking about what it means so that you become very comfortable with these terms coronal, sagittal, and horizontal. A synonym for horizontal is axial, so you will hear me use that term as well. This is the front of the brain, so the eyes would be about here and here. This then is the back of the brain. You can see the brain has two sides, or hemispheres as we call them. So when you're discussing a coronal view of the brain, or when you've taken a coronal perspective of the brain, that's following this light green square. You can almost imagine that as being you're sitting over here, perhaps on one side of a table, looking directly across the table at the brain. You'd be moving through the brain slice by slice in this kind of a fashion, from front to back, along this light green axis or perspective. A sagittal view then is this light blue rectangle. The sagittal view can be thought of as a profile view. In fact, some people remember a sagittal perspective by Archer, and that's sort of the same perspective as a sagittal view of the brain. In a sagittal view, just imagine taking this light blue rectangle and sliding it from one extent or side of the brain all the way through to the other extent or side of the brain. And then finally, the horizontal or axial view is moving from top to bottom or bottom to top. It would just be sliding this lavender plate up and down through the brain. I think of the axial view as though I'm on the ceiling, sort of hovering and peering down into or on top of a brain and then sliding through the brain in this fashion. So spend some time with this figure. Think about these plates here, the blue, green, and purple plates, what they mean, how the brain would change as you pushed those plates forward or backward if it's coronal, left to right if it's sagittal, and top to bottom if it's the axial or horizontal view. Next, you want to spend some time reading this paragraph I've written for you on Brain Basics. And finally, come down to this link. You'll want to click on this link that will take us to some images we can practice identifying brain perspectives here. My computer just a moment to open that link. I tried several times to get this to embed correctly. I'm not sure why it didn't, so you'll get this error message. So what we're going to have here is one brain, same brain, and we're looking at it from the sagittal or profile view, the axial or horizontal view, and the coronal or face-on view. I'll open each one of these and very quickly get you oriented, and then you should spend some time going through each of these, going through the brain slice by slice, making some notes about what you're seeing and what clues you have that let you know it's a sagittal or axial or coronal view. So let's start with the sagittal view. This first slide then is the most outside. It's the furthest edge of the brain that we could possibly see here. You do not need to start to worry about these specific names. If you're interested, of course, they're all in a key over here. That can be kind of fun to go through. We will come back and learn some of these as the semester goes on. But for now, I just want you to practice looking at brains and starting to get comfortable with that and understanding what the perspective is. So in this sagittal view then, every time you move to the next image or slice, you're moving a little bit deeper into the brain, so a little bit more towards the middle, and towards the middle. We begin to see here, you may already have a guess as to what's beginning to form, but we've moved far enough into the head now that we're actually beginning to see the eyeball. There's a much clearer view of the eyeball, the musculature that controls the eye and lets it move in your head. And then we have brain tissue. Keep in mind, because this is a sagittal or profile sideways view, we're not going to see both hemispheres or sides of the brain at once. You simply see one side. So I would spend some time scrolling through this, making some notes about what you're seeing. Here's obviously a nose and the sinuses, and get comfortable with that sagittal or profile view. Now if we shift to that axial or horizontal view of the brain, Remember, this is the one that's taken. It's as though you're hovering on the ceiling looking down into a brain. So here we have a nose. You can tell it's been cut off by the image here, but there's the nose, the very base of the nose, the bottom. This is the part of the brain closest to the floor. And then as you move along up here, you're moving closer and closer to the ceiling or the top of the brain. You may have a good guess as to what this is, and this over here, again, it's been cut off out of the image, but those are actually the ears here. So we begin to see a little bit of brain tissue in here. This bright white that you're seeing is bone. So here we've got the bottom of the skull, sort of that cartilage that runs down the middle of your nose. You can see that. As you move up closer and closer toward the top of the brain, again, you begin to see the eyes. Unlike the sagittal view, what you have now are two eyes. And again, the nose forming here. So spend some time moving through these images, looking at what you're seeing. Notice the symmetry. You can actually see the two hemispheres there. And finally, in the coronal view of the brain, which is that face-on view, so the image is though you're sitting on one side of the table and they're sitting directly across from you. This is out closest toward the nose, and then as you move through these numbers, what you're doing is you're moving further and further back in the head. So this is almost at the very, very back now. You can see the back of the neck here, the back of the spinal cord coming up into the back of the brain. Again, in this coronal view, you can see both hemispheres, so you're going to have some nice symmetry in the brain. But things will look a little bit different than they do in that axial view. I'll give you a clue. One hint that this is a coronal image and not that axial. In the axial, the brain is more of an oval shape. This again, in that axial view, you're on the ceiling looking down, whereas this you're just looking head on, so you're seeing it's more of a circle. So I would spend some time on this web page, looking through these different images, getting comfortable identifying them. When you finish that, you can go back to our class website, and there'll be a short quiz for you to take just to see how well you have mastered those perspectives.